Commander Sarah Chen stood in heavy metal chains before the huge black throne. The throne room was bigger than a football field. Dark walls stretched up so high that shadows hid the ceiling. Strange blue lights cast cold shadows everywhere. The alien sitting on the throne was Emperor Vexis Thule. He was 3 times taller than any human. His skin looked like gray metal. 4 bright yellow eyes stared down at Sarah. Sharp teeth filled his mouth when he smiled. That smile never meant anything good. Sarah had been his prisoner for 3 months. 3 long months of questions, threats, and pain, but she never told him anything useful. Her face showed no fear now. Her back stayed straight even with the heavy chains. Behind the throne, huge windows showed the prize that made Vex's Thule so proud. The TSS Prometheus floated in the massive hangar bay. Sarah's heart ached every time she saw her old ship. The beautiful human warship gleamed under alien lights. Its sleek gray hull stretched for almost 2 miles. Weapons that could destroy planets sat silent and cold. The Prometheus had been the most powerful ship in the human fleet. Sarah had commanded her for 5 years. They had fought together in dozens of battles. They had saved human colonies and destroyed alien fleets. Now the ship was just a trophy in the enemy's collection. "Your people are very strange, Commander Chen," the Emperor said. His voice sounded like grinding metal. "You humans are so weak and small. Your technology is primitive. Your ships are slow. Yet you caused so much trouble for my empire." Sarah did not answer. She had learned that silence was often the best weapon against Vex Thul. He loved to talk about how superior his people were. He loved to hear himself speak. "Before your pathetic war began, we thought humans would surrender in days," Vex Thul continued. "One attack on Earth, we thought, and you would beg for mercy. Instead, you fought for 3 years. You destroyed 17 of my fleets. You cost me thousands of ships and millions of soldiers." The Emperor stood up from his throne. He walked down the steps slowly. Each footstep echoed through the massive room. Guards in black armor stood at attention along the walls. Their weapons were always ready. "You personally commanded the worst defeats my forces ever suffered," Vex Thul said as he approached Sarah. "The Battle of Alpha Centauri. The defense of New Tokyo. The siege of Mars Station. Every time my admirals thought they had you trapped, you vanished like a ghost. Then you appeared somewhere else and struck again." Sarah finally spoke. "We call it tactics, Your Majesty. Something your people never learned." Vex Thul laughed. The sound was harsh and cruel. "Tactics? You mean running away like cowards? Hiding behind asteroids? Using dirty tricks instead of fighting with honor?" "I mean using our brains," Sarah replied calmly. "Something that seems to be in short supply around here." The Emperor's eyes flashed with anger. For a moment, Sarah thought he might strike her. Instead, he controlled himself and smiled that terrible smile again. "Your brain did not save you at Kepler Station," Vex Thul said. "Your final battle, your greatest defeat. I was there personally to watch your precious Prometheus fall. I saw your ship's weapons go silent. I saw your hull crack under our bombardment. I watched as my boarding parties captured your bridge." Sarah remembered that day all too well. The final battle had lasted 18 hours. Her ship and crew had fought until their weapons were empty and their armor was gone. In the end, the numbers had been too great. 50 alien ships against 1 human vessel. The Prometheus had taken 12 of them down before the end. "Your crew died well," Vex Thul admitted. "I will give them that honor. They fought to the last man. Except for you. You survived because I ordered my soldiers to take you alive. I wanted to study the famous ghost of the Outer Rim." The Emperor walked around Sarah in a slow circle. He was studying her like a scientist studies an interesting bug. "3 months I have questioned you," he said. 3 months to understand what makes humans so stubborn, so willing to fight impossible battles, so ready to die for causes they cannot win. Sarah turned her head to look at the Prometheus again. The ship looked dead. No lights in the windows, No glow from the engines. No signs of life anywhere. It hurt to see her like that. You miss your ship, Vex Thull observed. How touching. A warrior mourning for a machine. She's not just a machine, Sarah said quietly. Oh? The Emperor seemed amused. What is she then? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. How could she explain to this alien what the Prometheus meant to her? How could she make him understand the bond between a captain and her ship? She's home, Sarah finally said. She's family. She's a part of me. Vex Thull laughed again. Humans and their emotions. You attach feelings to everything. Your pets, your machines, your imaginary gods. It makes you weak, does it? Sarah asked. Then why did it take your entire empire 3 years to beat us? Why did you lose 17 fleets to our weak emotions? The Emperor's laughter stopped. His eyes narrowed with anger. Because you fight like animals. Without honor. Without rules. You use every dirty trick you can think of. We fight to win, Sarah corrected. We fight to protect what matters to us. Vex Thull stared at her for a long time. Then he looked back at the Prometheus floating in the hangar. Your ship belongs to me now, he said finally. My trophy. My prize. The symbol of human defeat. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Possession is not the same as ownership, Your Majesty. The Emperor raised one eyebrow. An interesting distinction. Please. Explain. Sarah looked back at her ship. That ship has a soul. Souls cannot be conquered. For the first time since her capture, Vex Thull looked genuinely surprised. Then he began to laugh. It was not his usual cruel laughter. This was real amusement. He found her words truly funny. A soul, he gasped between laughs. You think a machine has a soul? Oh. This is wonderful. Human superstition at its finest. Sarah said nothing. She just waited. The Emperor's laughter slowly died away. He wiped his eyes and smiled that terrible smile once more. Very well, Commander Chen, he said. Let us test your theory. Emperor Vex Thull walked back to his throne. Each step echoed through the huge chamber. Sarah watched him carefully. She knew that look in his eyes. He was planning something cruel. The Emperor sat down and leaned forward. His 4 yellow eyes focused on Sarah like laser beams. You believe your ship has a soul, he said slowly. You think it knows who its real master is. I know it does, Sarah replied. Vex Thull's smile grew wider. Then prove it. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. What do you mean? The Emperor stood up again and pointed toward the hangar bay. The Prometheus floated there like a sleeping giant. Start the ship, he said. If it truly recognizes you as its master, then make it come alive. Make it respond to your commands. Sarah stared at him. This had to be a trap. You're serious? Completely serious, Vex Thull said. My technicians have spent 3 months studying your ship. They have examined every wire, every computer, every system. They understand how it works. They know it cannot be started without proper authorization codes. 7-1. The Emperor began walking toward the hangar bay. His guards moved with him. Sarah was forced to follow, her chains clanking with each step. Of course, those authorization codes were destroyed when we captured the ship, Vex Thull continued. The computer cores were damaged in battle. The security systems were fried. Even if we had living human technicians to help us, they could not bring that ship back to life. They reached the edge of the hangar bay. The Prometheus looked even bigger up close. Sarah could see blast marks on her hull from the final battle. Holes where enemy weapons had punched through armor. Scorch marks where fires had burned. My chief engineer assures me that your ship is completely dead, the Emperor said. A beautiful corpse. Perfect for display but incapable of function. A new alien approached them. This one was shorter than Vex Thull but twice as wide. Its gray skin was covered in mechanical implants. Glowing blue wires ran under its flesh like veins. This had to be the chief engineer. Chief Engineer Zixnall, Vex Thull said. Tell our guest about your work on the human vessel. Zixnal's voice sounded like a computer trying to speak. "The ship is completely disabled, Your Majesty. We removed all power sources. We disconnected the main computers. We cut the control linkages. It would take months of work by qualified technicians to make it functional again. You see?" Vexthul turned back to Sarah. "Your ship is dead. A pile of beautiful metal and nothing more." Sarah looked up at the Prometheus. The ship seemed to loom over her like a mountain. She had spent so many years aboard that vessel. She knew every corridor, every room, every hidden space. The ship had been her home longer than anywhere else. "But you claim it has a soul," the Emperor continued. "You say it knows its true master. So prove it. Start the ship." "And if I can?" Sarah asked. Vexthul laughed. "If you can start that dead ship with no tools, no computers, and no help, then I will admit that human souls are real. I will release you and give you safe passage to human space." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You would let me go?" "I give you my word as Emperor," Vexthul said solemnly. "But when you fail, you will admit that human superstitions are foolish. You will acknowledge that your people are defeated. You will help me understand human psychology so I can better rule your colonies." It was a trap. Sarah knew it was a trap. But she also knew something that the Emperor did not know. Something his technicians had missed during their examination. "I accept your challenge," Sarah said. Vexthul clapped his hands together. The sound was like metal hitting metal. "Excellent. This should be most entertaining." The Emperor called for more witnesses. Soon dozens of alien officials filled the hangar bay. Admirals in gold uniforms, scientists with glowing instruments, palace guards in black armor. They all came to watch the human make a fool of herself. Chief Engineer Zixnal brought up holographic displays showing the ship's status. Every system showed as offline. Power levels were at 0. Computer networks were dark. Life support was dead. "As you can see," Zixnal announced to the crowd, "the vessel is completely non-functional. Every critical system has been disabled or destroyed." Quote. Murmurs of agreement came from the watching aliens. They seemed to be enjoying this. Some were placing bets on how long it would take Sarah to give up. Sarah ignored them all. She walked slowly toward the Prometheus. Her chains made it difficult to move, but she managed. Each step brought her closer to her old ship, her old friend. The boarding ramp was down. Alien guards had left it open so their scientists could come and go freely. Sarah could see into the ship's main corridor. Emergency lights provided dim red illumination. "The boarding ramp is the only way inside," Vexthul called out. "My guards will escort you to the bridge. You may try to start the ship from there. Take all the time you need." Sarah paused at the bottom of the ramp. She placed her hand on the ship's hull. The metal felt cold under her palm. But was there something else? A tiny vibration? A faint warmth? "Hello, old friend," she whispered, too quietly for anyone else to hear. For just a moment, she thought she felt something. A response. Like the ship was trying to tell her something. "Are you ready, Commander?" Vexthul asked impatiently. "I'm ready," Sarah said. She walked up the ramp and into the ship. The familiar corridors felt strange in the dim red light. This had been her home for 5 years. Every wall, every door, every corner held memories. The guards led her to the bridge, the command center where she had made hundreds of decisions during the war, where she had planned battles and saved lives. The captain's chair sat empty in the center of the room. All the control panels were dark. The main view screen was black. Even the basic life support indicators were offline. The bridge felt dead. "Impressive, is it not?" one of the guards said. "Your human technology is surprisingly sophisticated, primitive, but elegant in its simplicity." Sarah walked to the captain's chair. She had sat in that chair during some of the most important moments of her life. It felt right to be back there. "Well?" Vexthul's voice came through the ship's communication system. He was watching from the hangar bay. "Begin whenever you are ready." Sarah sat down in her chair. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The ship smelled different now. Alien scents mixed with the familiar metallic odor of recycled air. But underneath it all, she could still smell home. "Prometheus," she said softly. "It's time to wake up." Sarah sat in her captain's chair and looked around the dark bridge. Everything was dead and silent. The aliens had done their work well. Every screen was black. Every indicator light was off. Even the air felt still and lifeless. But Sarah knew something they did not. She reached under the armrest of her chair. Her fingers found a small, hidden panel. The aliens had missed this tiny secret. It was not marked on any blueprints. Only the captain knew about it. Inside the panel was a simple metal contact. Sarah pressed her palm against it. Nothing happened for several seconds. Then, she felt a tiny, warm tingle in her hand. "Prometheus," she whispered again. "Remember me." Down in the hangar bay, Emperor Vex Thul watched through the ship's cameras. He could see Sarah sitting alone on the bridge. She looked like she was praying. The thought amused him. "What is she doing?" he asked Chief Engineer Zixnal. "Unknown, Your Majesty." The engineer replied. "She appears to be touching something under her chair. But all the ship's systems remain offline." Vexus Thul nodded. "Let her waste time. The longer this takes, the more foolish she will look when she fails." But up on the bridge, something was happening. Something the aliens could not detect with their instruments. Sarah felt it first as a gentle warmth in her hand, then as a soft vibration that seemed to come from inside her own body. The Prometheus was not as dead as everyone believed. Human warships like the Prometheus had been built with special technology that no other race had ever developed. While other species built their ships with metal and computers, humans had learned to grow their ships. The Prometheus had living parts mixed in with the metal and electronics. Bio-neural networks that could think and learn. Organic computers that could adapt and heal themselves. The ship was not just a machine, it was partly alive. The aliens had found the regular computers. They had disconnected the normal control systems. But they had missed the living parts. The bio-neural networks were hidden inside what looked like ordinary structural supports. They appeared to be simple metal beams and support cables. Sarah's hand warmed against the contact panel. Through that connection, her thoughts reached out to the sleeping bio-neural networks. Her brain patterns were stored in the ship's living memory. The Prometheus recognized her like a dog recognizes its master. "Sarah," she heard in her mind. Not words, but feelings. The ship was happy she had returned. Sarah smiled for the first time in 3 months. "I missed you too, girl." The connection grew stronger. Through the bio-neural link, Sarah could feel the ship's condition. The aliens had hurt her badly. Many systems were damaged or destroyed, but the living parts were still intact. Hidden. Waiting. "Can you move?" Sarah asked silently. The response came back as images and emotions. The ship showed her which systems could be repaired, which circuits could be rerouted through the bio-neural networks. It would take time and energy, but yes, she could move. "Then let's wake up slowly," Sarah thought. "Don't let them see what's happening." Down in the hangar bay, Zixnal checked his instruments again. "Still no power readings, Your Majesty. No system activation. The human appears to be failing." But something was wrong with his readings. They showed 0 power consumption from the ship, but that was impossible. Even a dead ship should show some minimal energy signatures from residual charge in capacitors and backup systems. It was as if the ship was not just offline, but completely absent from his sensors. Sarah felt the first stirrings of life in the Prometheus. Deep inside the ship's hull, bio-neural networks began connecting to each other. Organic circuits started growing new pathways around damaged areas. The ship was healing itself from the inside. The process was very slow. The aliens could not detect it because it used almost no energy. The bio-neural networks worked like living cells, repairing damage bit by bit. They converted trace elements from the ship's structure into new growth. They used quantum effects to generate tiny amounts of power. "Status report," Sarah thought to her ship. Images flooded her mind. The Prometheus showed her everything. The main engines were badly damaged but could be repaired. The weapons systems were offline, but the bio-neural networks could rebuild the control circuits. Life support was dead, but the organic backups were still functional. Most importantly, the ship's power generation system was intact. The aliens had destroyed the control systems, but the fusion reactors themselves were undamaged. Once the bio-neural networks finished growing new control pathways, the Prometheus could power herself again. "How long?" Sarah asked. The ship's response came as a feeling of time passing. Hours, not days. The networks were already spreading through critical systems. Emergency power would be available soon. Sarah opened her eyes and looked around the bridge again. Nothing had changed that the cameras could see, but she could feel life stirring in the walls around her. The ship was waking up. On the hangar deck below, Emperor Vex Thul was getting impatient. The human had been sitting in her chair for 20 minutes without doing anything visible. "How much longer should we allow this charade to continue?" he asked one of his advisors. "Perhaps we should give her more time, Your Majesty," the advisor suggested. "It will be more humiliating for her when she finally admits defeat." Vex Thul nodded. "Very well, but I grow bored watching her sit there." Above them, Sarah felt the first real signs of progress. Emergency lighting circuits came online deep inside the ship, not the regular emergency lights, but bio-neural alternatives that the aliens had never found. Organic light sources that looked like normal metal when they were dark. Life support next, Sarah thought. The ship responded by growing new connections to the air recycling systems. The aliens had destroyed the computer controls, but the actual machinery was intact. Bio-neural networks could operate it directly. Sarah took a deep breath. The air tasted slightly different now. Cleaner. The ship was starting to filter and renew the atmosphere again. "Weapons?" she asked silently. The response was more complex. The big guns were too damaged. But the point defense systems could be repaired. The bio-neural networks could grow new targeting circuits. It would take longer, but they could be ready in a few hours. Main engines? The engines would be the hardest part. They required enormous amounts of power and precise control. But the bio-neural networks showed her a plan. They could repair the control systems one piece at a time, start with basic thrust capability, and work up to full power. Sarah felt excitement building in her chest. The Prometheus was really coming back to life. Slowly and carefully, but surely. "Stay hidden," she reminded the ship. "Don't let them detect anything until we're ready." The ship sent back feelings of agreement and patience. They would wait for the right moment. Sarah looked at one of the security cameras on the bridge. Through that camera, Emperor Vex Thul was watching her. He probably thought she was giving up, getting ready to admit defeat. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The first sign was so small that most people missed it. A tiny vibration in the hangar floor. So faint that only the most sensitive aliens felt it through their feet. Even they dismissed it as normal movement from the space station's systems. But Chief Engineer Zeke Snall noticed something odd on his instruments. "Your Majesty," he said quietly to Emperor Vex Thul, "I am detecting minor energy fluctuations." "From the ship?" Vex Thul asked. "No, Your Majesty. That is what puzzles me. The readings suggest power generation, but not from any source I can identify. Perhaps interference from the station's own systems." The Emperor looked up at the Prometheus floating in the hangar bay. The ship looked exactly the same as before, dead and dark and lifeless. On the bridge, Sarah felt the ship's excitement growing. More systems were coming online every minute. The bio-neural networks were spreading faster now. They had reached critical mass and were accelerating their own growth. "Careful," Sarah warned silently. "They're starting to notice something." The ship sent back feelings of caution mixed with eagerness. It wanted to be fully alive again, but it understood the need for patience. Sarah could feel the main power systems building toward restart. Deep in the ship's core, fusion reactors were warming up. The bio-neural networks had grown enough control pathways to begin the startup sequence, but they needed to be smart about this. If they brought the reactors online too quickly, the energy surge would be detected immediately. Slow and steady, Sarah thought. Make it look like random fluctuations. The Prometheus began its power generation sequence. Instead of the normal fast startup that would light up every alien sensor, the ship brought its reactors online gradually. Power levels rose so slowly that they seemed like background noise. Zixnal frowned at his readings. The energy fluctuations were getting stronger, but they still did not make sense. His instruments could not identify the source. It was as if power was being generated from empty space. "Perhaps we should investigate, Your Majesty," he suggested. "Investigate what?" Vexthul asked. "Background energy readings? We are on a space station with hundreds of power systems. Of course there are fluctuations, but the Emperor was starting to feel uneasy. Something about this situation bothered him. The human had been sitting motionless for almost an hour. She should be frustrated by now. She should be asking for help or making demands. Instead, Sarah looked calm, almost peaceful, like she was meditating. On the bridge, Sarah felt the ship's power levels reach 20% of normal. That was enough for basic systems. Life support was fully operational now. Artificial gravity was stable. The ship's bioneural networks had established control over all essential functions. "Structural integrity?" Sarah asked silently. The ship showed her damage assessments through their mental link. The hull breaches from the final battle had been sealed with emergency patches. The main structure was sound. They would not fall apart if they had to move quickly. Weapons status? Point defense systems were coming online. The bioneural networks had rebuilt most of the targeting circuits. The main guns would take longer to repair, but the smaller weapons could be ready soon. Sarah smiled slightly. "Engines?" The response filled her with joy. The ship's mighty fusion engines were almost ready. Not at full power yet, but enough for basic maneuvers. Enough to get them out of here if necessary. Down in the hangar bay, more aliens were starting to notice the vibrations. The floor hummed softly now. A deep, rhythmic pulse that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "That is definitely not normal," one of the admirals said nervously. "It sounds like engine harmonics." Zixnal's eyes went wide as he looked at his instruments. The energy readings were still climbing. Whatever was generating this power was getting stronger by the minute. "Your Majesty," he said urgently, "I recommend we evacuate the hangar bay immediately." "Why?" Vexthul demanded. "What are you detecting?" "I am not sure," the engineer admitted. "But the power levels suggest something is building toward activation. Something large." 1. For the first time since this began, Emperor Vexthul felt a cold touch of fear. He looked up at the Prometheus again. The ship still looked dead. But now he noticed small differences. Were those lights flickering deep inside the hull? Had that antenna moved slightly? Was that a faint glow from the engine nacelles? "Impossible," he whispered. On the bridge, Sarah opened her eyes. Around her, control panels were beginning to show signs of life. Status lights blinked on one by one. Display screens flickered with startup sequences. The bridge was waking up. "Prometheus," she said aloud. "Status report." Her voice was calm and professional, the voice of a starship captain taking command of her vessel. Through the security cameras, every alien in the hangar bay heard her clearly. A computer voice responded from the bridge speakers. Not the artificial voice of a machine, but something warmer, more alive. The voice of the ship's bio-neural consciousness. "Welcome back, Captain Chen. All essential systems are operational. Power generation at 30% and climbing. Engines warming up. Weapons systems charging. We are ready to depart at your command." The words hit the hangar bay like a thunderbolt. Aliens began shouting in panic. Some ran toward the exits. Others pulled out weapons and pointed them uselessly at the massive ship above them. Emperor Vexthul stood frozen in shock. This was impossible. His engineers had assured him the ship was completely dead. They had spent months making sure it could never operate again. "How?" he shouted toward the bridge. "How is this possible?" Sarah's voice came through the ship's external speakers. She sounded completely calm. "I told you, Your Majesty. This ship has a soul. Souls cannot be conquered. Warning alarms began sounding throughout the hangar bay. Emergency lights flashed red. An automated voice announced in the alien language that all personnel should evacuate immediately. Chief Engineer Zixnall was frantically working at his control panel. "The ship is generating massive amounts of power," he shouted over the alarms. "Primary fusion reactors are coming online." "This is impossible." "Shut it down," Vexthul commanded. "Cut all power to the hangar bay. Activate the emergency containment systems." "We tried, Your Majesty," Zixnall replied. "The ship is not drawing power from our systems. It is generating its own energy from an unknown source." The vibrations in the floor were getting stronger. The deep harmonic pulse of the ship's engines could be felt in every bone. Dust fell from the hangar ceiling as the massive structure began to shake. On the bridge, more systems came online every second. Navigation was operational. Communications were active. Defensive shields were charging. The ship was becoming fully alive again. Sarah could feel the Prometheus's joy through their mental connection. The ship had been sleeping for 3 months. Now, it was awake and ready to fly again. "Weapons?" Sarah asked. "Point defense systems operational, Captain," the ship replied. "Main batteries will be ready in 30 minutes. "We will not wait that long," Sarah said. She stood up from her captain's chair and walked to the main control station. Her chains had somehow fallen away during the startup sequence. The ship had used a micro-beam to dissolve the metal. Through the bridge windows, Sarah could see chaos in the hangar bay below. Aliens were running in all directions. Some were trying to reach weapon emplacements. Others were heading for escape pods. Emperor Vexthul remained near his throne, surrounded by guards. He was staring up at her with a mixture of rage and fear. Sarah activated the ship's external communication system. Her voice echoed through the hangar bay with calm authority. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Space Service vessel Prometheus. Emperor Vexthul, you are ordered to evacuate this hangar immediately. I am taking my ship home." Emperor Vexthul's face turned dark with rage. His 4 yellow eyes blazed as he stared up at the bridge of the Prometheus. The human woman stood there calmly, as if she owned the entire universe. "You dare give me orders?" he roared. "I am the Emperor of the Catherian Empire. You are my prisoner." Sarah's voice came back through the ship's speakers, still perfectly calm. "Not anymore." The Emperor turned to his guards. "Destroy that ship. All weapons. Maximum power. Turn it into scrap metal." The hangar bay's defensive weapons came online. Massive particle cannons emerged from hidden panels in the walls. Energy weapons that could punch through the armor of any known vessel. They all turned toward the Prometheus and began charging up. But Sarah was ready for this. "Prometheus. Point, defense, active." "Acknowledged, Captain," the ship replied. The Prometheus had been designed to fight entire enemy fleets. A few defensive weapons in a hangar bay were no threat at all. As the alien guns fired, the ship's point defense systems responded instantly. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out from small turrets along the ship's hull. Each beam was perfectly aimed. The alien weapons exploded in showers of sparks and metal before they could finish firing. In seconds, every defensive gun in the hangar bay was destroyed. Smoke and debris filled the air. Emergency fire suppression systems activated, spraying foam everywhere. "Impossible!" Chief Engineer Zixnall shouted. "The ship's weapons were completely disabled." "We removed all the targeting computers," Sarah heard him through the external sensors. She smiled as she replied, "You removed the computers you could find. You never found the ones that mattered." The truth was something the aliens could never understand. Human ships did not rely only on electronic systems. The bioneural networks could target and fire weapons using organic processes. They could think and react faster than any computer. Emperor Vexthul realized that his defensive guns were useless. But he had other options. The space station around them had hundreds of military vessels docked at various ports, warships that could destroy the human vessel if they acted together. "Alert all ships," he commanded. "Battle stations, destroy the human vessel before it can escape." Throughout the massive space station, alarms began sounding. Catherian warships started powering up their engines and weapons. Crews ran to their battle positions. In minutes, dozens of armed vessels would be ready to attack. But Sarah had expected this too. "Prometheus, how long until we can move?" "Engines are at 50% power, Captain," the ship replied. "Sufficient for basic maneuvers. Full power, available in 10 minutes. "We do not have 10 minutes, Sarah said. "Emergency departure. Now." "Acknowledged. Securing for immediate departure." The Prometheus began to move. Slowly at first, then with growing confidence. The massive ship rose from the hangar floor, on pillars of fusion fire. Artificial gravity kept everything stable inside the ship, but the aliens below felt the full force of the engine wash. The hangar bay became an inferno. Superheated plasma from the ship's engines filled the space with deadly radiation. Any aliens who had not already evacuated were vaporized instantly. Emperor Vex Thul and his remaining guards retreated behind energy shields. The heat was so intense that even their advanced protection systems were struggling. "Stop her!" Vex Thul screamed. "Whatever the cost, do not let that ship escape." But it was already too late. The Prometheus was moving toward the hangar bay's main exit. The massive doors were designed to keep the vacuum of space from rushing in. They were never meant to stop a 2-mile-long warship moving at full acceleration. Sarah stood on her bridge and watched the doors approaching. They looked very solid, very thick, but the Prometheus had been built to ram through enemy battle lines if necessary. "Prometheus, barrier ahead. Can we break through?" "Affirmative, Captain. Hull integrity is sufficient. Recommend emergency collision protocols." "Approved. Take us home." The ship's bioneural networks redistributed power throughout the hull. Structural supports were reinforced. Damage control systems prepared for impact. The Prometheus became a living battering ram. The hangar doors exploded outward as the great ship smashed through them. Metal and debris scattered into space. The Prometheus burst out of the space station like a bullet from a gun. Behind them, atmosphere rushed out of the damaged hangar bay. Emergency force fields struggled to contain the breach. More alarms sounded as the station's life support systems tried to compensate for the massive air loss. But Sarah was not thinking about the station anymore. Ahead of them lay open space, and beyond that, human territory, home. "Captain," the ship's voice said urgently. "Multiple enemy vessels approaching. 47 ships detected. They are moving to intercept us." Sarah looked at the tactical display. Enemy ships were coming from all directions. Some were small patrol vessels, but others were full-sized warships. Together, they had enough firepower to destroy the Prometheus even at full strength. And the Prometheus was not at full strength. Many weapons were still offline. Armor was damaged from the final battle 3 months ago. Against so many enemies, even she might not survive. "Options?" Sarah asked. "Recommend immediate jump to hyperspace," the ship replied. "Engines have sufficient power for emergency transition." Sarah shook her head. "Navigation systems? Partially operational. I can calculate a jump course, but accuracy may be reduced. We could emerge anywhere within 100 light-years of the target. That was better than being destroyed here." But Sarah had another idea. A risky idea that might give them a better chance. "Prometheus, can you access the station's communication systems?" "Affirmative, Captain. Bioneural networks maintain connection to all systems we recently contacted. Open a channel to all enemy ships. Full broadcast." "Channel open, Captain." Sarah's voice went out to every Catherian vessel in the area. Dozens of alien captains and crews heard her words clearly. "This is Commander Sarah Chen, aboard the starship Prometheus," she began. "To all Catherian vessels. You know who I am. You know what this ship has done to your fleets. You know what happened at Alpha Centauri, New Tokyo, and Mars Station." She paused, letting her words sink in. In the space around them, enemy ships continued to approach. But some were slowing down. Their captains remembered those battles. They remembered how many ships the Ghost of the Outer Rim had destroyed. "Your Emperor challenged me to prove that this ship has a soul," Sarah continued. "I have proven it. The Prometheus is alive. She is angry about her captivity. She wants to go home, I suggest you let us pass. On the enemy ships, captains looked at their tactical displays. The human vessel was moving away from the station. Its weapons were mostly offline. It seemed like an easy target, but this was the ship that had destroyed 17 fleets. This was the ghost that had appeared from nowhere and vanished like smoke. Many of the aliens had fought against her before. They knew how deadly she could be. I offer you this choice, Sarah said. Let us pass peacefully, and no one dies today. Try to stop us, and I will show you why we are called the Ghost of the Outer Rim. Several enemy ships began to slow down. Their captains were having second thoughts about attacking the legendary human vessel, but not all of them were afraid. The largest warship in the group began accelerating toward the Prometheus. Its captain opened his own communication channel. Human vessel, you will surrender immediately. You are outnumbered 47-1. Even you cannot defeat such odds. Sarah smiled coldly. Prometheus, target that ship. Show them what we can do with partial weapons. Targeting solution acquired, Captain. Point defense systems locked on target. The enemy warship was still 2 miles away, much too far for effective point defense fire. But the Prometheus had not revealed all her capabilities to the aliens during their examination. Fire, Sarah ordered. Brilliant energy beams reached out across space. But these were not normal point defense weapons. The bioneural networks had modified them during the repair process. They were now much more powerful than before. The enemy warship exploded in a ball of flame. Debris scattered in all directions. The massive vessel was destroyed so quickly that its crew never had time to send a distress signal. The other enemy ships stopped moving. 46 vessels hung motionless in space, their crews stunned by what they had just witnessed. Anyone else want to try? Sarah asked pleasantly. No one answered. The enemy ships began turning away one by one. Within minutes, the space around the Prometheus was clear. Wise choice, Sarah said. She closed the communication channel and turned to her ship's controls. Prometheus, set course for human space, maximum speed. Course laid in, Captain. Jump to hyperspace in 30 seconds. Sarah sat down in her captain's chair and looked back at the alien space station. Through the bridge windows, she could see the massive structure falling behind them. Emperor Vexthul was somewhere inside that station, probably screaming with rage. Goodbye, Your Majesty, she said softly. Thank you for the lesson in human psychology. The stars stretched into lines as the Prometheus jumped into hyperspace. The ghost of the Outer Rim was free again. And somewhere in human space, the war was about to take a very different turn. Sarah smiled as she felt her ship's joy through their bioneural connection. They were going home together. Where they belonged. Behind them, Emperor Vexthul stood in the ruins of his hangar bay. His throne room was open to space. His prize ship was gone. His reputation was in tatters. But worst of all, he had learned something about humans that he wished he had never discovered. They were not just warriors or survivors. They were something far more dangerous. They were engineers who could make their machines come alive. And those living machines would never abandon their creators. The ghost of the Outer Rim was heading home. And when she arrived, humanity would be ready to fight back with weapons the aliens had never imagined.